I found this super cute photo on Unsplash, but it was a bit bland. I wanted a more fantasy feel to the piece, so this is how I accomplished that goal.
Being that the colors are going to be completely different than what I have on my reference photo, I had to come up with a color palette. Now, if you have a hard time coming up with colors on your own, one of the things that you can do is head over to Pinterest and just type in color palette. You will get so many beautiful, beautiful ideas that you can use in your own projects when you also are not copying the reference photo exactly. As always, all of the supplies that I'm using are listed in the video description. To start off with, I am using my soft tools and just filling in my background. Now, I am not worried about details, clean edges, or anything like that. This is going to be a little bit out of focus looking, a little bit blurry, pretty messy, really. Terrible. Terrible is the word I'm looking for. It's going to look terrible for the underpainting, and that is normal when I work with PanPastels. I'm not going to get the crisp detail until I go over that with my colored pencils. You can also use pastel pencils if you prefer that. And in between multiple layers, I do a fine mist with my Spectrafix. This is going to help to seal those pastels to the paper better. It will still smudge, they're still workable, but it's going to help them just to stick better to that paper. And that's really going to help when I go on top with my colored pencils later, and especially in my case, because I'm going to be blending those colored pencils with odorless mineral spirits. If you don't put a sealer over the PanPastels before you blend with colored pencil and odorless mineral spirits, you can end up with this sort of pasty, muddy effect when the OMS blends in with the PanPastels. But in this case, I've already sprayed everything or sealed it with the Spectrafix before I start with the colored pencil, so it's not going to be an issue here. I'm not having to layer this on super thick. It doesn't need to be that thick. If it's too thick, it'll actually make it so that it's hard for the colored pencils to stick on later. Although the Spectrafix will help with that to an extent. I've got my glassine taped down so that as I work, I can rest my hands down without smudging the artwork. And I'm starting in with my colored pencils, going to block in the leaves. Now, I'm not trying to make these look super realistic, but I do want a little bit more dimension to them than just flat, solid green. I'm using multiple pencils here, a combination of my Faber-Castell Polychromos, Caran d'Ache Luminance, and Derwent Drawing, as well as Derwent Lightfast pencils. I'm blending that with odorless mineral spirits, and I really like that dark, dark navy blue color, so I'm going to go ahead and fill the rest of my background in that dark. That's going to allow the mushrooms to just stand out that much more if I can get the contrast between the dark background and the light orange mushrooms. One of the problems that people often have when they blend colored pencils with odorless mineral spirits, they'll say that it doesn't work, it doesn't blend well. I think that they're expecting it to behave like a watercolor pencil would. With watercolor pencils, you don't need a lot of pigment on the paper. You blend with the water over it, the color goes everywhere, super saturated. With colored pencils, that's not really what's happening. we need a lot of pigment on the paper to get this level of color when you blend with the OMS. And because this paper is a bit more rough, it's picking up more of the color from the pencil with less effort from you. If I work on a watercolor paper, which I still love, so I'm not saying that one is better than the other, I'm just pointing out the differences so you're aware when you're working. But if I work on a watercolor paper, I'm gonna do more light layers to build up to where I have that much pigment on the paper. Here, because that paper is a little bit more rough, it's picking up, it's forcing the pencil to leave more of itself essentially on the paper. So when I blend with OMS, that just blends beautifully. Now for smooth blending, your wax-based pencils, or pencils that have a higher wax content, I should say, like your Caran d'Ache Luminance or the Derwent Lightfast or Derwent drawing pencils. I know Derwent Lightfast says they're oil-based, but in practice, they behave more like a wax-based pencil. But the higher wax content is going to blend smoother with OMS than the oil-based pencil, meaning the Faber-Castell Polychromos. So be aware of that too. That's why you see me using here my Caran d'Ache Luminance and my Derwent Lightfast pencils for that background. I'm going to use my Polychromos when I get into finer details where I want really crisp lines. That's a harder pencil, so those are wonderful for details. But smooth blending, I want something that has a higher wax content. And that's not to say that Faber-Castell Polychromos can't blend smooth, but you've got to put a little bit more work into getting it to be not super grainy looking, especially on a paper like this. I'm going to repeat the process of applying multiple layers with the blue and then blending with the odorless mineral spirits, let it dry, and then go over it again until I get my pigmentation to be where I want it to be. And I don't need nearly as many layers as I would have if I wouldn't have put the PanPastels down first. The PanPastels saved me a lot of time because I wasn't fighting against the white of the paper. And onto the stars. So there is my mixture of the Touch Up Texture Titanium White mixture from Brush and Pencil. And I'm just going to flick that all over. Now you could just dot it on with your colored pencils. It won't be quite as bright as this, and it will take a lot longer. This gives a much more natural look than trying to apply stars the polka dot method. And it doesn't matter if those stars get a little bit on the panda, we're still gonna go over, or red panda I should say, it's not really a panda, but we're going to be going over him with colored pencils. So if any of these white dots get there, your colored pencils will completely cover that product. You could use this for whiskers, you can use this for details, and then go over it with whatever color you want. So if you're having a hard time with a colored pencil piece, making something stand out, this product is wonderful because you can paint it white and then put whatever color on top once it's dry. Now onto the fun part of all the details. So I'm using my Derwent Lightfast white because this is going to be a very opaque white. I'm going to use this to start drawing in the fur. Now while I do have that nice reference photo, remember I wanted to make this look more like a fantasy piece. And because I changed the colors of the background, I made it nighttime, I can't just use the same colors that were in that photo. I need to start pulling colors from my color swatches so that everything works together nicely. When you're working with a one reference photo and you're changing the background to a different reference or just something out of your head, you need to make sure that those colors are working together. So any colors that I'm pulling in my background, I want to pull into my subject. And here I wanted to use a lot more reds, oranges, and purples in his fur so that that will work with the color swatch that I had, or color palette I should say, that I had chosen.
Really quick, before we finish this up, if you would like to follow along with the 2.5-hour version of this tutorial, Pencil Stroke by Pencil Stroke, don't bite the microphone, head over to patreon.com/Lachri where you can get this video and over 400 of my other longer tutorials for as little as $6 a month. Thanks to members like you, I'm able to keep my lessons really low cost for everyone. Your butt, why is this a thing? This is your butt is in my face.
As I move on to the areas around the eye, I'm going to start switching over to my polychromos more because those sharpen to such a nice point, and those are going to hold their shape better, so it holds that point better than my softer pencils. Softer pencils are going to be more opaque, but they're not going to hold that sharp point. You can see I'm making all of the fur a lot darker using a lot more purples. When you blend with odorless mineral spirits, it's going to make everything look really dark, especially if you're working on Canson Me-10s. Even in this case, the white Canson Me-10s, it will look a lot darker when it's wet. Once it dries, it's going to lighten up, so just be aware of that as you're working. Don't be afraid if it gets really dark. It's important to pay attention to which direction the fur is moving. So I don't need everything to be exact to the reference photo. I'm not sitting there counting 15 hairs going that direction, 14 the other direction, but I am making sure that they're going the right direction. I'm also paying attention to where the highlights are, highlights and shadows. Even though I'm using completely different colors, I do want my values to be similar to the reference photo. So lights light enough, darks dark enough. I have always used glassine under my hand to keep the oils from my skin off of my artwork. The problem is that I work upright, so I'm taping it constantly, taping it and moving it, taping it and moving it as I work, depending on the area I'm working on. Here, I finally, I don't know why I didn't think of this sooner, took a piece of cardboard, that's what you're seeing move around there, and I taped glassine to one side of it. Now I can easily just move that cardboard wherever I need it to go, and I've got glassine that stays firmly in place as I work. It has made everything so much easier. And on this piece especially, because I'm jumping around so much, the amount of times I was taping and untaping, I just kind of got fed up on it. So that's where I went and got it, just an old, this is probably an Amazon box, that I just taped glassine to one side too. And my life has been so much easier. And you can just replace that glassine as it starts to get dirty. But I've been using the same one now for months, and I've wiped it down a couple of times. It hasn't needed to be changed. Now, even though I don't need anything to look exactly like any reference photo, I still got a reference photo for different mushrooms. So I had an idea of how they should be shaped. I got a reference photo for that butterfly, so I knew how his wings should be positioned. Even when you're doing things where you've got an idea in your head, you still want reference photos for those ideas. If I'm drawing trees, I want to make sure I'm getting a lot of reference photos for different trees so that I get them to be pretty accurate. Remember, whenever you are drawing something, even if it's an idea out of your head, so obviously, let's say a dragon, you're not going to go find a photo of a dragon, but you can find photos of different reptiles, so you have an idea of what that skin texture should look like. And that was the case here. I know what mushrooms look like, but I still want to pull up reference photos to get an idea of the shapes and maybe where the shadows are going to go. Even if I completely change the colors and how they're otherwise drawn, it's going to help your work to look much more realistic, even if it's something a bit more fantasy-based.
Do you have a hard time making your shoulder turkey behave? No, that wasn't the script. Do you have a hard time making your paintings and drawings look more realistic? Do they tend to come out looking more on the cartoony side? I have the answer and solution to that problem in this video. But you can't bite the piece. You're gonna bite it. Don't bite it. Ready?